and gentlemen, welcome to Retro Warriors episode 296. As always, I'm your host, Justin Baker, and as always, I'm joined by resident old bastard, Chris Satter.
Hello.
Satter, we have no housekeeping other than please go listen to Cinema Rogues.
Indeed.
It's a show.
Definitely.
You can listen to it. My week,
Uh-huh.
I went, so I got the Series X.
Yes.
You know, we talked about it, I think, a couple episodes
Right.
ago. And I was immediately crushed because, well, now I only have one type of controller to use for my Series X.
No, you have any of your
And
Xbox One controllers?
Yeah, but that really is kind of the same
basically the
controller,
same
just a little bit worse. So I've been playing fighting games on my Xbox. I got Street Fighter 4, King of Fighters. I've been playing Killer Instinct. I picked up Dragon Ball Fighter Z 'cause I like fighting games, and playing them on a Series X pad. It slices my thumb up to
so
pieces.
weird.
That D-pad is the Captain Crunch of D-pads whenever I'm playing fighting
I have
games.
tried
I
so
cannot-
hard to emulate whatever it is that you are doing, and like the only way I can possibly make this D-pad uncomfortable to me is if I'm like aggressively trying to break the controller. And even
Yeah,
then, only if I'm making 360 motions.
It's sliding. I slide my finger around a lot, and that D-pad is. I like that it is a big rockable disc D-pad, but I don't. It has comparatively sharp edges when compared to other D-pads of that type.
I was playing some Street Fighter 4 on mine, and it feels great. It feels so much softer on my thumb than most D-pads, and I'm loving it.
Hard disagree.
Well, that's because I leave my thumb mostly in one place and just press the pad with different parts of my thumb.
Oh no, I slide my thumb all like the tip of my thumb. I've also
which is so
learned that
weird.
I push the buttons on a Series X controller with the first knuckle of my right thumb.
What?
Like, I don't push them with the meat of my thumb or the tip of my thumb, but like right where that first knuckle is the part of my thumb I push the buttons with.
That's how I do the D-pad too. I'll if I'm hitting left, I'm using where my first knuckle
No,
is.
D-pad gets the tip. It gets the tip.
Just the tip.
Anyway, my point is
That you don't know how to use a D-pad is what you're
that
pointing.
most of the time it doesn't bother me, but in fighting games where I stop, like, because I can train myself, like, hey, quit grabbing the controller so hard, it makes your hands sweaty, quit pushing the buttons weird, quit, I can mentally tell myself to stop doing these things.
Right.
But fighting games rely so heavily on muscle memory that and quick reaction time that I always end up forgetting and pressing too hard on the D-pad, and it hurts my thumb. Weird. And so I was like, well, are there any fight pads for the Series X? Yes, it comes out in a month, and it's $50. Okay, maybe I'll just get an Xbox One fight pad. Oh, Hori made one, and everyone thinks it's the rarest controller on Earth, and they want $100 for it. And I was like, okay, an arcade stick. Can I get an arcade stick? Well, let me tell you, PS4 is the premier fighting game console.
Right.
So there are very limited Xbox One arcade sticks, and there's a new one coming out from Hori that came out at the end of February, actually. It's out.
Nice.
And it's a mere $200 entire dollars.
Fuck.
And the reviews say that it is entirely plastic and cheap feeling. So I was like...
That's worth $200, right?
I was like, nah, I'm good. But I still, in some games like the game we're talking about this week, and like Streets of Rage and stuff, like I really prefer it on a just like the M30 has become my preferred like everything controller that isn't 3D.
Right.
And so I went online and I did research, and I was like, what I really want to use is my new 8BitDo arcade stick, my new wireless arcade stick that I got for last Christmas. I got it, and I can't use it. And I found that someone found out that if you plug an 8BitDo wireless adapter in X input mode into a Brook Xbox 360 to Xbox One adapter, it will work on the Xbox One X. And so I said, well, feasibly that'll work on the Series X because it works on the One X. It's cross-compatible. And so I bought a Brook Xbox 360 to Xbox One adapter, and I did not trust that it would work because my 8BitDo wireless receiver plugged into my 360 does not show up as a 360 controller. But it turns out the Brook 360 to Xbox One adapter is just a general X input converter.
Nice.
So now with my Series X, with my Brook 360 to Xbox One adapter plugged in, and with my 8BitDo wireless adapter plugged into that, I can now use Switch, PS4, Wii U, Wii remotes, any 8BitDo controllers, my wireless arcade stick, my M30s, my N30s, my SN30 Pro Pluses, everything.
Nice.
So I suddenly have all of these controller options, and I've been playing fighting games with my M30 and Streets of Rage with my M30, which feels great. Nice. I've actually ordered a new lever for my 8BitDo arcade stick because now it looks like it's going to be my main stick on a couple of different consoles. So I figured, hey, I don't love the lever in it. I will order a new one to mod in there. And yeah, it's if you're because I don't know why. Actually, I do know why. Everything is like Switch and PS4. Every 8BitDo, everything works on Switch and PS4. All these different controllers, all over the place. Switch and PS4. Arcade sticks, they're like mostly PS4. Yeah. Like there are tons of PS4 sticks, a couple on the Switch, and then Xbox had one that I know of. It was the Razer. Yeah. Razer made a version of theirs for it. But the Xbox, it's like, no, there's a couple of fight pads, they're sold out. There
has to be something behind it. It has to be like the controllers just don't sell as well on Xbox.
I think that's it. Well, really, Xbox is not big for fighting games.
Sure.
And I was like, that makes sense. But Xbox is big for like, well, no, I don't know. I was going to say like 360 was big for shmups, which sounds weird to say, but 360 had a lot of shmups on it. And a lot of shmups that aren't anywhere else too.
Right.
But really the Switch has kind of replaced that.
Yeah, that's true.
As the shmup console. So fighting games and shmups are not premiere on the Xbox. And so, yeah, the only thing I can guess is, like you said, that they just don't sell as well. And so there are very limited Xbox control options if you don't want to just use a regular Xbox controller, which most of the time I do.
Well, there was that one weird Hyperkin controller that was terrible.
Oh, the X91?
Yeah, that was just awful. Don't
and then, of course, you can't make wireless Xbox controllers because Microsoft doesn't license out their wireless technology, which is stupid.
That's so dumb.
And so yeah, the controller options are very limited. I think maybe it also has to do with the fact that Microsoft seems pretty keen to, like they have things like the Xbox Design Lab, which is coming back, where you can get custom controllers. They had the big fancy Elite controllers, two of those came out with.
Adaptive controller.
Yeah, I feel like there's just a limited enough amount of games that require alternative controller types and just enough first party flexibility and options between like colors, or maybe you just want nicer stuff, or maybe you need adaptive controller, that third parties, there's no gap for them to step in.
I wonder if you could make the world's most badass arcade stick out of an adaptive controller.
I actually thought about that. I was like, if I get the adaptive controller, couldn't I just plug all sorts of shit into it? I was like, no, that's crazy town, Justin. Stop it. Just plug adapters into adapters until it works, which is what I did. Yeah. And it feels so much better. I played a bunch of Killer Instinct today with my M30, and it's.
I have learned that I am clearly much less picky than you are about gamepads.
There are some games, if it is a 6-button fighting game where I have 3 punches and 3 kicks, I need those laid out on a 6-button layout. I need all 6 buttons facing in a row with each other. I just can't. And what's weird is I played triple-digit hours of Street Fighter 4 on the 360 with a 360 pad, but since then, I cannot do 6-button games without a 6-button layout.
I played so much Street Fighter 2 and Street Fighter Alpha 2 on Super NES. Like, just in 1992 alone, or was it 93? Whatever the year right after it came out was, I probably poured 200-300 hours into that game. Just single player even. So I am so used to fighting games on a traditional gamepad that I can just adapt to whatever is handed to me when I'm playing.
Yeah, it's weird. Game. I didn't grow up with Sega stuff. I discovered I always refer to it as the Sega layout, which is the nice disc style D-pad that's real big with the 6-button layout, the Saturn layout. Yeah. When I discovered it a few years ago, I for whatever reason I clicked with it in a weird way, and I'm like, this should be for everything.
Yeah, I did try to encourage as many of my friends as possible to exclusively play our fighting games on the Saturn, and then they would bring over new PlayStation fighting games. So it didn't work.
So I've my anything 2D, I want to play it on my M30. Anything 2D. Anything 3D, Series X controller is great. It's a wonderful controller. But yeah, I've also been playing the new Ghosts and Goblins Resurrection, Rebirth, Reborn, re-something, Revengeance, Ghosts and Goblins re-something. And it's tremendously hard.
Yeah.
But thankfully includes an invulnerability mode if I finally get fed up and go back to that. But I've been having a really good time with it. I wasn't sold on the art style. I still kind of am not. I still would kind of prefer something more 2.5D kind of looking thing than this weird, not even like painterly. They have this weird like
it looks kind of storybook.
Yeah, kind of presentation.
It almost looks like the kind of storybook that you'd see at the beginning of a Monty Python movie.
Yeah, kind of like that. I don't love that, but I'm really enjoying the game. I'm having a pretty good time with it.
I picked it up today at your insistence.
I forced you.
You did. You twisted my hand.
I see you also put it in your notes as ghosts or ghouls and ghosts and goblins and linens and things.
Right. I think that's the formal name of the game. No, I just started it today, so I've got very little experience with it so far. It does feel just as unfair as I remember the series always being.
Oh, yeah.
I actually like the art style. I think it's neat and original enough that I'm willing to put up with it. It probably isn't what I would have asked for or what I would prefer.
Yeah.
But it's unique enough that I'm willing to give it a break. If every game was looking like that all of a sudden, I'd be really pissed off though.
Yeah, I guess it is a good break from the standard, like either your options usually feel like you either get Shovel Knight or you get Mega Man 11.
Right.
Like those are the two art styles for retro style games. The
only game I can think of that has a similar-ish art style is Rock of Ages, which I love that game.
Yeah. It does feel like that. I've not played any of those, but it does look a lot like that.
It's so dumb. Yeah. Oh my God, I love those games so much. The sense of humor in that game is the dumbest shit in the world. Anyway, but no, I'm enjoying it no matter how much it is infuriating me, because I'm playing on the second to lowest difficulty level, the one that is not invulnerable. But
I finally gave up and went to well, no, so you're on Squire, so I started on Knight.
Oh, I wasn't about to do that.
Yeah, if you're going to go all the way down to Page, which is invulnerability, then you have to start a new save. Yeah. You can't drop your existing game down to the invulnerability.
Though I started on the level above that, and when I die, it still asks me if I want to lower my difficulty.
That's
so
weird.
There must be some kind of gradual difficulty levels in between things.
Maybe.
But no, I started on that second to last one, or second to lowest one rather. And the main difference that you'll see from prior Ghosts and Goblins games is that you can get hit multiple times before you're out.
Yes.
So you'll lose parts,
which may
of
not
your
be
armor.
True of higher difficulty.
Right. I assume the higher difficulty is more traditional Ghosts and Goblins.
Yeah, you lose your armor and then you die.
Right. Whereas on the lower difficulty, you lose parts of your armor before you eventually lose all of your armor and then die.
It kind of makes it even more comical because you'll like get hit in the legs and your pants fly off, but you still have the rest of your armor on. Or you'll have the armor on your arms, but then your torso's nude.
Yeah, it's pretty ridiculous. I feel like there are some parts of it that are almost more difficult than the original, but it feels, maybe that's just because of how fluid the art style and everything is. I'm not expecting the kind of cheap bullshit arcade mechanics that the original had.
Yeah.
So that might be it. But it is still enjoyable. I'm enjoying it. I'm looking forward to playing a little bit more of it. I can't imagine I'll get much further before I just drop down to invulnerable mode and then just push my way through. I also have been playing more of the Blizzard Classic Arcade, that collection that came out a couple weeks ago. and I'm still liking it. And somebody online realized that if you get the PC version of the game instead of the console version, it just has a folder in its install path called ROMs that has all of the ROMs in the collection, so you can just play them on whatever fucking emulator you want.
Yeah,
and
good.
And so even these new definitive editions of these games that they have made is just right there. So play it on whatever emulator you want. You
hear that, Nintendo? Did you hear it?
I did not get the PC version, so I do not have that, but I did buy it on Xbox, so I felt justified in downloading IPS patches to turn my existing ROMs into those ROMs because I bought it already. But I've still only played it on my Xbox. I made the ROMs available on my PC and was like, anyway, back to my Xbox. And I have now finished Lost Vikings on there. I have finished Blackthorn on there. Which I hadn't finished Blackthorn since back when it first came out, and I forgot how dumb and occasionally bullshit some of the later levels get. Like, it's kind of unfair, but you can push your way through it. Like, if you die enough, you will get to the end, and since it has a rewind function, that's not a problem. And then I was like, well, might as well go to Rock and Roll Racing, which is a game that I love and played a ton of as a kid. But apparently I never played it beyond the default, lowest difficulty level. Yeah. Because in order to get any achievements, you have to beat it on the highest difficulty level. And I learned, it is unfair. It is cheap and it is mean and it is unfair. And I was not enjoying it nearly as much as I did originally. So I might just leave those achievements for
leave it in your mind as it was.
Yeah, I'll just enjoy the game as I remember it and just only play it on rookie difficulty because it's still a good game then.
Let's knock some news out. First up, online multiplayer added to the Switch version of Turok 2. Finally, I can subject everyone else to Turok 2.
No, you can't.
A game I have played so much of.
I don't care how much money you give me. I will not play Turok 2 with you.
I don't know if you know this about Turok 2. There is a gun in it called the Cerebral Bore.
I remember that.
Shoots a homing bladed funnel that attaches into an enemy's brain, juices their brain, and squirts it out the funnel.
Yeah. I had a friend that
How are you not intrigued?
I had a friend that was a huge fan of Turok 2 when it first came out.
Are you not entertained?
Oh, it's such a bad game.
Street Fighter V patch breaks stereo sound effects, making the game unplayable for blind players. And I did not know this about Street Fighter V. It was previously praised in the community for being very blind player friendly.
Yeah, I had no idea about that either. But then I watched a couple of videos of some of the more premier level blind players, and I could not compete with that. Like, holy shit, man.
It's not a facet of the game I ever would have thought about, but yeah, apparently it was very good in that regard, that it was playable.
And from what I read, it does appear to be an unintentional mistake.
Hopefully it will be fixed. I assume
it turned the entire game's sound effects into mono instead of stereo, and that was what broke it.
Bloomberg's Jason Schreier, that sounds fucking weird.
Every time.
Reports that the failure of Anthem and the success of Jedi Fallen Order has caused EA to approve switching the next Dragon Age from a games as a service game to a traditional single player game, thus saving what would inevitably have been a piece of shit.
Right. Yeah. Thus preventing EA's next failed games as a service.
I think wasn't the last Dragon Age Inquisition?
I don't know. I'd never played any of those.
I think it was the last one, and it was weird and different, but I liked Inquisition. It was okay. It was different enough that it didn't feel like Dragon Age, but it was fun in its own way. Final Fantasy VII Remake DLC announced at Sony's State of Play press conference, alongside 2 upcoming Final Fantasy VII mobile games. One of them seems to basically be the remake we kind of all wanted. I mean, granted, I know a lot of people saw the new remake and they're like, no, I don't want that anymore. Now I want this new thing. And more power to you. But back when they first announced Final Fantasy VII Remake, it looks like they're really doing the Final Fantasy 15 Pocket Edition thing.
Right, yeah, that's what it looks like.
But for Final Fantasy VII. Yeah. So it looks more traditional, turn-based Final Fantasy VII kind of thing. Have they announced if it's going to follow the original Final Fantasy narrative or the Final Fantasy VII remake
I did
narrative?
not read that, so I can't speak to that.
I would be interested, because if it's like the original narrative, I might play it. If it's the remake narrative, I don't know that I will.
I don't know. I
I
kind of like the remake narrative. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, well, I know eventually I'm going to play Final Fantasy VII remake, and I want to keep that narrative for its own thing. Is why
someday
I'm not trying to trash.
When you hook up a PS4 or 5 again.
Oh, you mean when they port it to Xbox in after April when it loses its exclusivity?
I'm guessing PC first and then Xbox. They might announce.
I got a PC. Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl announced alongside new open world Pokemon game that looks kind of Gale of Darkness-y kind of Pokemon game.
If you say so.
But I'm excited for Diamond and Pearl remake. Diamond and Pearl, when they came out, weren't the most celebrated, but the third version the combined version they came out with, Platinum, is a very celebrated Pokemon game and one that I very much enjoyed. I'd probably put, like nostalgia aside, I would put Platinum and Black and White 2 up there as what I personally feel were the best of the mainline Pokemons that I played.
I know so little about the franchise after that first game that I will just take your word for it.
I used to say that, I only like the original game, but really I think I put the most time in on Gold and Silver, which of course also had very good remakes. Bandai Namco announces a full withdrawal of their North American arcade business.
That is some tragic news right there.
Yeah, that's upsetting. Really, I mean, some days it feels like Bandai Namco and Sega were the only ones left in the arcades that weren't just making giant touchscreen ports of iPhone games. Yeah, Capcom. I forget about Capcom.
You could play Street Fighter V online in an arcade. It's weird.
That's true. I did that. It is weird.
Yeah.
It's very strange and disorienting.
It is unfortunate and distressing that Bandai Namco is backing out. I am hoping that they are willing to license their games to Western publishers if they even still keep making arcade games in Japan. So we'll see.
Yeah. Forever Entertainment confirms a remake of Panzer Dragoon 2 Zwei is in the works, as well as an unannounced IP from Square Enix.
That's nice.
That's exciting. I feel like Panzer Dragoon remake came out and then everyone kind of forgot about it, myself included. So I was kind of worried about, like, is this going to go anywhere? Yeah. But this does, maybe Saga one day.
Oh,
maybe.
Man, I hope so. Oh.
It could happen. They'll have to redo that CG because I think technically it's illegal to have CG that bad in this day and age. I don't think that's legally allowed.
Also, Sega lost all of the code for Saga. It's all gone. So they would just have to work off of a compiled Saturn version of the game.
An HD remake of the GBA game Robotech the Macross Saga was released on Switch with no warning. We didn't know it was coming. Here it is. You can play it. It's a game.
Yeah, that's a weird random announcement too.
Macross Saga was like one of those animes that, for whatever reason, a lot of companies got the rights to, and it aired on cable constantly in the 2000s, right. It felt like. It felt like everyone was like, hey, kids like anime now. Let's air Macross Saga. It's cheaper than Akira. Like, well, it's the same thing, really, right? We'll put that on. So that's strange.
If you like Akira,
you'll like Macross Saga. Epic Games has purchased Tonic Group Games, including creators of Tonic Games Group, including creators of viral hit Fall Guys.
Yeah.
Which kind of doesn't come as much of a shock because Fall Guys does kind of hit that same sort of Fortnite business model, it feels like. And everyone has said from the beginning that they did not expect Fall Guys to get as big as it did. Right. And it seemed like there was maybe some early growing pains with the game. So
yeah, and after their acquisition of the Rocket League guys, was that last year, I think? It just feels like that's the approach that Epic is going to go right now until Fortnite eventually gets dethroned. They're just going to keep using that money to grab any smaller studios that they can that have a product that could reach that same level.
Which Final Fantasy series creator Hironobu Sakaguchi's Mistwalker Studios has announced a new JRPG with the diorama look.
That looks so cool.
Mostly because they are physical dioramas that they constructed and then put the sprites into.
Oh my God, it looks so cool.
Exclusively for Apple Arcade.
God damn it.
Well-known video game platform Apple Arcade.
I don't know.
Bite me.
I don't know what's going on at Mistwalker. Like, I get that that's going to be very popular in Japan.
At this point, Mistwalker's thing is picking the system that isn't the one that RPGs are normally on and just doing that.
No, because they didn't release it on Stadia yet.
They did the JRPGs on Xbox 360.
Right.
They were like, oh, look, we're doing those. Didn't they do one of the Wii ones?
They did do Last Story on Wii.
Yeah, and Wii was also not known for its JRPG lineup, and now they're like...
It was a really late Wii game, too.
It was. And then now they're like, Apple Arcade's getting JRPGs now. Like, they seem to be going where JRPGs aren't and just being like, make games here. We don't care.
I wonder if what they're doing is just, we don't want to compete with Square Enix on their turf, so let's find some other territory to fight.
I don't know, man. When you see the way they talked about the 360, they were like, fuck yes, this is it.
Right.
They believed in the 360.
But it wasn't just them either, because before the 360 came out, like, I remember thinking like, oh, there's no way I'm going to buy my Xbox before I buy something else. And then Square Enix came out and they're like, we've got a new Star Ocean. We're going to put Final Fantasy 13 on this system. And then Namco came out and they're like, we're going to make a new Tales for this system and it's going to be out at launch. And then also Mistwalker with their games. And I was like, oh shit, this is going to be a JRPG machine. I have to buy this. I have to buy one of these now.
In some ways, it's kind of fascinating how bad the 360 did in Japan. It really is kind of fascinating.
Oh yeah, because it felt like they had the right pieces in place before launch, and then as soon as launch happened, they just dropped them all on the floor and forgot what to do with those pieces.
A lot of them followed through, but then everyone was like, "We're not paying attention to you right now."
Right.
Like they just didn't. A physical release of cult anti-RPG, that's what I used to be, anti-RPG, Moon hinted at, alongside possible modern re-release of obscure PS2 game Tulip and Rule of Rose. PS2 games, pardon me, Tulip and then the game Rule of Rose. It's not one game called Tulip and the Rule of Rose.
That would be really weird. I am a fan of Rule of Rose, and I would be happy to get it because it currently sells for like $400 or $500 now. And so I cannot afford an actual copy for my PS2. So
I thought Rule of Rose was a Rumble Roses sequel.
No, it's a really dark survival horror game.
Oh, okay.
It's very different from
now,
that.
Moon did get, in Japan, a very nice physical edition. I assume it would be the same one. And Onion had talked about bringing it out here.
Right. Well, the digital release came out over here.
Yeah, digitally it's available
they
on
didn't
the
do
eShop.
physical yet. And so now they're hinting at potentially doing a physical release, which is exciting. I'm all for that.
Diablo 2 Remastered will import save data from Battle.net, which really just kind of upsets me because there used to be like a 3-month timer where they're like, if you don't log into your Battle.net for 3 months, we're going to delete your Diablo character. So now they're telling me all my Diablo characters they deleted, I could have imported those.
Yeah.
I just had to log in every 3 months for the last 2 decades. Although someone was saying in the chat, I was talking about it in the Discord, someone was saying in the chat they removed that restriction eventually.
Yeah, it was around the time that they upgraded Battle.net before Diablo 3 released, I think. Or maybe it was before StarCraft 2 released. They had changed it to where you had a permanent account instead of just that floating account that you had to log into every so often or it would get deleted. And so, yeah.
NIS America announces NIS Classics Volume 1 featuring Soul Nomad and Phantom Brave for Switch. Which is exciting.
That is the second time they've re-released Phantom Brave on a Nintendo console, which is...
What was the last time?
The Wii. They ported it from PS2 to Wii.
Oh, yeah, it was on Wii.
Yeah.
I remember I played some Phantom Brave on Wii, and then I played Disgaea on DS.
Yeah.
Weird.
Yeah, every now and then, Nipponichi's just like, we're going to port shit everywhere.
Blaster Master 03 and new Pocky and Rocky announced at New Game Plus Expo, which is quickly becoming an expo to pay attention to for me anyway.
Yeah, if you're into Japanese-style games, it is definitely one of them.
Comcast and Nintendo confirmed that the Orlando opening of Super Nintendo World has been delayed until at least 2025. That's a lengthy.
Well, that's the next time I'm going to Orlando, at least.
Ultima series creator and definitely not certified nut job Lord British, or as he's known on Earth, Richard Garriott, has now traveled to the bottom of the ocean, making him the only person in human history to have visited both poles, outer space, and the deepest point on Earth. Yet he still can't seem to make a good game.
I'd like to note that you said that he is known on Earth as Richard Garriott. Let me just say, he spent some time on the International Space Station, and he was known as Richard Garriott there as well. So even outside of Earth.
Some days I feel bad for Richard Garriott. Yeah. He really did. He made some really cool games, and then seemed to forget how to do it.
Right. And then he sold his company to EA and just pieced out.
Yeah, and then he seemed to have just wholesale stolen Peter Molyneux's personality. Just a weird guy.
Well, for the last almost 2 decades now, he's just been completely unrelated to video games. Just barely even discusses his previous history. And now he is apparently the president of something known as the Explorers Club, which is a group of people that explore the Earth. And
does Richard Garriott know that the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen was a fictional tale and he cannot recreate it?
I mentioned it in the chat earlier, but I don't know that I've ever seen a picture of Richard Garriott where he doesn't look like someone just explained to him how cameras work, and he's very excited to see this witchcraft in person.
Yeah, I don't know. I could just see him and James Cameron and Elon Musk starting a crime fighting team together
with John McAfee.
Yeah, all of them just showing up and stopping a bank robbery,
but then also accidentally robbing the bank in the process.
Right.
That seems like a thing they would do.
And now in my head, I'm trying to think of a League of Extraordinary Gentlemen type scenario and what their powers would each be. And for Richard Garriott, I was he would just gambit throw floppy disks, right? That would be his. Elon Musk would just teleport out of everywhere.
No, Lord British would just knight random passersbys and turn them into soldiers.
Let's get into the topic at hand. We're talking Radiant Silvergun. Which is that one really expensive shmup on the Sega Saturn. You may be aware of it, due to its high cost. My first encounters with it were, I kept hearing about Radiant Silvergun spoken in the same breath as Rondo of Blood.
Weird.
And they were both always coming up on lists of the best imports that you could spend way too much money on.
Okay.
And in the aughts, I listened to a lot of podcasts that touted them as necessary imports, and a lot of collectors treated them both games as status symbols. It would be oh, that guy owns Radiant Silvergun, and then you'd be oh, he's rich? That was how the discussion went, and nobody I knew even knew anybody that had even ever seen Radiant Silvergun in real life. It was just this fascinating, weird, extremely expensive game. And no one ever talked about the game. They were just oh, it's $250 for one video game, which was insane in the aughts, let me tell you. And then I didn't play it until it came out on 360.
Yeah, which was
is when I actually finally put in time on it, yeah.
So I was introduced to the game by the same guy that ironically introduced me to Rondo of Blood.
Did he make a lot of podcasts in the aughts? Because I think I've heard from
him. This must have been around 2000 or 2001. So this was not long after it came out. This was the one other guy I knew that owned he owned a Duo. I had a Turbo CD.
Right.
And he had an imported Saturn instead of a domestic Saturn. It's got better games. I had.
Yeah, you remember back before we could just make an Amazon Japan account and importing stuff was a thing. Yeah. You're oh, you imported it?
Yeah.
A guy at a store ordered it with something else, and it came on a boat, and it took 6 months, and it cost $700.
I got so
for
many
this one orphan VHS tape.
Yeah, he. I had modded my Saturn, and he had imported a Saturn. So he was well, there are no good American games on the Saturn. He was that guy. And then he bought an action replay so that he could
I'm kind of that guy. There's not a lot of good American games on this. The Japanese Saturn lineup is stellar.
It is much better, but there's still some good ones domestically.
Like Bug?
Yeah, mostly Bug and Bug 2.
Go ahead, Saturn. Defend Bug. I'm going to make you. Then we'll do Clockwork Night. We'll just go down the list.
I like both of those games. Fuck off. So
you're allowed. I can't legally stop you.
So I went over to his house, and he was like, hey, I got this game on the Saturn, and you have to play it. I'm like, what is it? And he was like, it's a shmup. And I'm like, all right, yeah, I can play shmup. And I watched the dude go 3 levels without taking a hit in Radiant Silvergun.
Yeah.
And
do you know how much money he spent on the game?
Yeah, he spent like $60-$70, something like that.
Okay. All right.
And I watched him play it for a while, and I was like, this looks gorgeous and amazing, and I have to have it. He was like, well, there's a store in this town not too far away that will import it for you. And so I went over there and was like, hey, I need this Saturn game. And he was like, oh, well, it's out of print, so I'm going to have to charge you $95. And I was like, fine. And so I eventually saved up enough to go pay the $95 to get my copy of Radiant Silvergun. And it was exactly what I wanted it to be. And I kept it for quite a while. And then a little around 10 years ago, give or take, I was like, hey, I need some money right now. And I already have Radiant on the Xbox 360. It's worth like $150 now. I should sell this. God, why did I do that?
You did it, Saturn.
Man, why did I do that? Some dude is so happy that he got my copy of Radiant that still had the spine card and everything in it.
Yeah. Let's talk release info. Yeah. This was developed by Treasure, who you may remember from McDonald's Treasureland Adventure and Yu Yu Hakusho Makio Toitsutsen.
I do remember them from that.
As well as Tiny Toon Adventures, Buster's Bad Dream, and Hajime no Ippo, The Fighting. They also made Wario World and Dynamite Headdy and Gunstar Heroes.
Didn't that Buster game get canceled? I think the Tiny Toons game got canceled.
Know. I just pulled up a Wikipedia list of Treasure games and picked the dumbest shit on it.
Yeah, they're probably best known for Gunstar Heroes, Guardian Heroes, and Ikaruga.
Yeah.
I would say that's their best known games.
You don't think they're best known for Yu Yu Hakusho Makio Toitsutsen?
I'm not gonna say they're not.
Tell me about the development of Radiant Silvergun.
Yeah. So they had spent quite a while prior to this making mostly platformers for Sega, stuff like Gunstar Heroes and it was Alien Soldier and McDonald Treasureland Adventure. And so they were wanting to reach out. They were wanting to do other things. They were wanting to not just work for Sega. And several of the people on the staff were big fans of arcade style shmups, and they wanted to give that a shot. The president of Treasure at the time was a guy Masato Maegawa, and he was worried that the arcade business was shrinking, and also what was left in arcade games was pretty much fighting games. And so he didn't think there was a great market for this, but eventually the rest of the team talked him into it, and he did greenlight the project. The director of the game was Hiroshi Iuchi, and he thought that too many of the shooters of the era were just copies of the Toaplan style vertical shooters, where you just get rained with power-ups.
Right, and he's not super wrong. No. A lot of bullet hell games of that era were just that cranked up to 11.
Right, exactly. And he wanted to do something specifically different from that. His goal was, we won't do that. The one game that I could find that he mentioned as an influence was Irem's Image Fight, which I am not familiar enough with to be able to say how it was an influence. It is a thing that I rented 30 years ago and have not touched since then. Only 10 people from Treasure touched the game at all. The entire game was 10 people. You had 3 programmers, 4 artists, and a sound designer. And then the director and producer. And the decision was made to make the game on the Sega STV arcade board, which was the one based on the Saturn.
Yeah.
And they were already familiar with it due to making Guardian Heroes and Silhouette Mirage. So they were already familiar with the Saturn as a platform. And apparently the early concepts of the game were drastically different. The title of the game was in reference to people flying through the sky holding silver guns in each hand, which was apparently the theme.
That at least makes the name make more sense.
Only a little more sense. And then they just changed everything, but they were already attached to the name, so they just kept it. And early on, he had decided he wanted no power-ups in the game. He found them to be distracting when he played games. He said that when he would play shmups, he would often die trying to manage weapons or chase down power-ups. And
which that's a fair assessment. Yeah. I do feel like they found a good workaround with their system that we'll get into later. But yeah,
and it was also decided to make the bullets slower on the screen than they were in other contemporary games to encourage people to try to weave between them instead of just dodging them all the time. And I can definitely see that. Before reading that sentence, I never once in my life would have said the bullets are slow in Radiant Silvergun.
You know, I had the same thing. I was Hardcore Gaming 101 has a great, very extensive article on Radiant Silvergun. I was reading through it, and they were talking about how slow the game was. Yeah. And I similarly would have never described it as a slow shmup. But when you're like, when you're like, okay, here's Death Smiles and Dodonpachi, and here's Radiant Silvergun, like, oh yeah, it's way slower by a lot.
And it also feels more fair. Just because it for me anyway,
you feel like your deaths are your fault more often,
right?
I would agree with that.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah,
but yeah, that's pretty much it. And then of course the game released, and since it was already on STV, they easily ported it over to the Saturn console itself.
The arcade version had no story,
right?
But when they ported it, they added a story, and they outsourced the animation to Gonzo, which is the company that did like Desert Punk and Afro Samurai and Speed Grapher. They've done tons of anime. Yeah. And they made full anime cutscenes for the game.
Full voice acting.
I've heard that the story in Radiant Silvergun is very interesting.
I have no idea.
And I would love to experience it. And I say that because I can't. Well, I cannot experience the story in Radiant Silvergun.
I played the game a lot on the Saturn, and I don't speak that language.
Yeah, so on the Saturn, the story's it never released in America, so it was in Japanese. They ported it to 360 and added subtitles. But I can't beat the 360 version of the game.
I also have a hard time anytime any of the text comes up while I'm supposed to be actively playing.
Right. You're playing a shmup and having to read subtitles.
Yeah, I can't.
It's hard. And in the 360 version, allegedly, if you play for a certain number of hours, I think the number was 7, then the game unlocks a free play mode. But I suspect it's only the arcade mode that you get free play on, and the arcade mode does not include the story. And 2, it didn't unlock for me after the allotted number of hours.
That sucks.
And I went way over the allotted number of hours. I was like, maybe it didn't count some of my time or something. Yeah. Because initially I was like, I know, I'll leave it paused overnight, but my Xbox shut itself off automatically after 2 hours. Yeah. And I was like, oh.
Right.
And then I just played a bunch more. And I never could get that unlocked. So I've never gotten to experience the allegedly very good story in Radiant Silvergun. I'm frustrated about it.
Either one of us could have watched a YouTube video.
That's ridiculous, Saturn. What is YouTube?
I don't know.
I don't understand. Is it like Daily Motion? Can you explain it to me? Can I load it up in Real Player?
How would you relate it to Vimeo?
But there is a full... well animated basically an anime built into this shmup, which is that's cool.
I remember the dude who introduced the game to me, who also does not speak Japanese despite what a massive elitist he used to be. He would just make up the story every time we would play the game. And so anytime a character would start talking, he would make up a completely unrelated story about what we were experiencing this time. And it got increasingly stupid every time we played the game, to the point to where it was borderline offensive a lot of the time.
Yeah. Let's talk gameplay, since we can't talk story because we are not skilled enough to earn Treasure's story. In lieu of power-ups, the game has 6 weapons, which are 3 main weapons and 3 combination weapons that you get by either using the top row of your Saturn buttons, your XYZ buttons, or combining your A, B, and C buttons in certain ways.
And the arcade version only had 3 buttons.
Right. So your 3 main weapons are your Vulcan, which is like just shoots your red bullets forward. It's like any Vulcan in any shmup. You have your homing shot, which is kind of like the homing shot in Gunstar Heroes.
Yeah.
It kind of shoots out to the sides, left and right a little bit, but then homes.
Yes.
It's these big homing orbs. And then you have your wide shot, which is interesting that it shoots way out to the left and right, and it explodes and does like AoE damage and seems to do the most damage in general of the 3. So. But obviously, since it shoots nowhere in front of your ship, it's hard to hit with.
Yeah, it's great when there are enemies only on the side of you, though.
Then I'm going to skip this one and go to, you have back wide, which is basically a Vulcan that shoots behind you. And one little bullet in front of you. You have homing spread, which is just straight. It creates a radius around your ship and just shoots laser beams into anything in that radius. And then you have the homing plasma, which is favorite. 2 lines that move back and forth and like Raiden style electricity shoot things, and it's useless.
Oh, I love that one. That is
the only one. That's the only one that I'm like, this is fucking useless.
I will go most of the game powering that up more than any of the others.
How do you hit anything with it? It just locks onto one thing. And you're like, no, hit this other shit.
If you hold the button down, it'll lock onto a lot of things.
It does not do that for me. It doesn't like me. I cannot do anything with homing plasma.
Sure, you didn't somehow have auto fire on or something?
I am sure. That said, this game does really map well to a Saturn pad, to a 6-button controller. Yeah. I had a really hard time playing it on my Xbox. Really? Now I can play it with my M30 because, like I said, I got my controller adapter and it feels right. But I had a really hard time mentally relearning the game. Again, a 6-button layout on not a 6-button layout controller. I had the hardest time with it.
I think the reason why I had less of a hard time with that is because even on the Saturn when I'd play the game, I would basically just use the 3 buttons.
No, see, I always used the 6 buttons.
Yeah, I very rarely used the combo buttons, except for to do all 3 at once. That's the only
But because of these six weapons, and they do level up. The more you use them, the stronger they get. And so like your homing spread will get a wider radius to attack things. Your Vulcan starts shooting a wider shot. Things like that.
And it saves your progress as far as your leveled up weapons. So the next time that you play the game, you will start it wherever you left off.
Right. So if you're playing story mode over and over, you will eventually get stronger and stronger and stronger. The game also uses this chain system. So all enemies are colored either red, yellow, or blue. And destroying consecutive enemies of the same type increases your chain bonus, which gives you more points, which gives you more power-ups from getting lots of points. Or not powers, pardon me, extra lives.
Yeah.
And interestingly, this incentivizes not killing all enemies indiscriminately, which is a foreign concept in the shmup world a lot of the time. The 2 games that don't just want you to destroy everything on screen are Radiant and its sequel, Ikaruga. That's those 2 games. And then you have your special attack. So instead of a bomb, you get the Radiant Sword.
Which,
so when you press your shoulder button,
powered up, is useless.
It's not. When you press the shoulder button, the Radiant Sword sweeps around the ship, and you can hold the button down to keep the sword out. It's super short range, but it absorbs pink bullets. Only pink bullets, nothing else. And you'll notice the pink bullets in the game are the ones that don't follow these patterns, these dodgeable patterns. They're the ones that the game will just shotgun blast at you.
Because it expects you to eat them up with your sword.
Yeah. And once you eat enough bullets, you can press the shoulder button again for a big, massive, high damage attack. It does not fill the screen, which frustrates me.
No, but it fills a lot of the area to your sides and in front of you.
A bunch of it, yeah. And so this means that the game that they use this mechanic interestingly in the game, where they'll put you in segments where they obviously want you to use pink bullet dot eating Radiant Sword powers to get through certain areas, which I appreciate the design of. but I would prefer something like a bomb that I can use when I feel like I need it, not when the game tells me I might need it, if that makes sense. I feel like this system is very interesting and well designed, but it makes the game harder for me than just being like, here's 3 bombs. Just use them.
Since I'm the kind of person that hoards everything in every game that I ever get ever, and also in real life, I don't have as much of a problem with this because my Radiant Saber is always fully charged up.
I don't know that I have a problem with it as much as I find that it makes the game more difficult than something that just gives you screen clearing bombs.
Yeah, I can get that, but I do save it explicitly for those moments, possibly because I've played the game enough to know when they're probably coming, though.
Yeah. And the game telegraphs some of them because you'll be like, oh, there's a lot of pink bullets here. Yeah. Might need my Radiant Sword soon. Interestingly, the stage order is
weird.
Wrong.
Yeah.
You start in stage 2, which when you play the story mode, you find out is a flashback sequence. Mm-hmm. Stage 3 is the beginning of the main game's story, but you go from 2 to 4, and then 5 and 6 continue from there, and stage 1 is the chronological end of the entire story, and you encounter it last. Now, I'm sure astute listeners are asking themselves, why wouldn't you just rename the number of each order to be the order you encounter them? And the answer is they didn't. So,
this is well, they're being very I don't know,
very Tarantino-esque about their
something
stage ordering. I don't know.
It's very avant-garde stage numbering.
Yeah. Really, the bosses of the game are kind of its bread and butter, in the same way that Gunstar Heroes was very much like, hey, yeah, there's levels, but really you're here to fight cool bosses. Yes. I do feel like this suffers from this like back-to-back boss syndrome, where it gives you so many bosses that even the unique ones don't stand out because there's just so many.
Right, and also you don't have to kill them. More often than not, if you do just a little bit of damage, eventually they'll just bail.
Yeah,
and then you can continue on, and if that does happen, you'll get a progress report right afterwards to tell you how poorly you did at killing them.
I do love that all of the bosses, or not all of them, most of the bosses operate differently depending on the order in which you damage their individual components that can be damaged individually, which is really cool. Yeah. Most bosses are 2 or 3 different portions of robot spaceship that do different things and shoot different things, and if you destroy it in different orders, they'll adopt different behavior patterns. And that means that after fighting them multiple times, sometimes they'll still do stuff that you don't expect because maybe you used this weapon instead and it destroyed them in a different order than it did previously. So the bosses are usually interesting, even ones that you're very accustomed to. Every now and then they'll surprise you with stuff.
I also appreciate that it does the Darius thing where before each boss it gives you a big warning screen with some random text on the side.
It has English text on it, and it'll have things that's like, be smart, look at boss. And you're like, okay.
And sometimes it comes across as like a joke, and other times it comes across as possibly a bad translation.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out, like, are they just throwing random words like as like a jokey, like they don't think anyone will read this tiny little warning text, or is it like just someone didn't translate it well?
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
I do have a problem with the way the boss encounters are structured. Very often you'll have bosses back to back to back. You'll have 2, 3, 4 bosses in a row, and their difficulty feels almost random. Like the first level 2, will you'll play through. Very early on, you hit a boss and it's pretty easy, and then you hit another boss. And it's okay, it's moderate difficulty. And then you hit one of the hardest bosses in the early half of the game, and then you hit a pretty easy boss. Like they slam you with varying difficulty bosses, and it feels almost nonsensical sometimes. Where you're like, okay, that guy was really hard and took me forever, and this guy just died instantly. Like what? Why?
Yeah, and some of them don't even give you enough of a chance to really damage them unless your weapons are powered up. And they just almost immediately implode.
Yeah, and like in stage 2, the first stage, there's a boss. I was in the chat, and one of our Discord members was in there, and they were like, "Oh yeah, Gallop is terrible," which is in the first stage. It's the one with the little metal bit in the front that you can't shoot through. Oh my god, what an annoying boss! And all the bosses around it are pretty easy bosses.
Is that the one where you have to shoot at the metal bit so it comes forward and then dart in there to shoot it? Yeah.
Yes. But I design wise, it's very well designed.
Oh, yeah.
It plays a lot with shmup convention. It does interesting things with level design. Like there's one boss that is basically like the end of Gradius, where you're having to like shoot yourself through these little tunnels and down different paths to fight this boss.
Right.
It's just there's a lot of really inventive level and boss design, and the game does a lot with funneling the player into certain parts of the screen or forcing you to choose paths and other similar segments.
And it really, you can tell that it was designed by people who appreciate the genre.
Right. It was very intentionally designed, very smartly designed. You could tell they really thought about how you were going to look at every encounter, which they could do because they knew exactly what tools you would always have at your disposal.
Yeah.
So in some ways, they were able to so deliberately design it only because it has no power-ups and no bombs, and they know what you're going to have.
Yeah.
They know exactly how many pink bullets they've fed you this level, so they know everything you're working with.
Right.
And I love the deliberate design of the game in that way.
Yeah.
I hate how fucking hard it is. It is brutally difficult.
It is very, very tough, but I feel like it is not as tough as a lot of older shmups. Like a lot of the ones that I played on NES or TurboGrafx or stuff. There's a lot of those that were very much just quarter eaters, just arcade quarter eaters that were straight ports. That I felt those were more difficult.
I think in some ways, it frustrates me more here only because the game is so deliberately designed. And sometimes in other shmups, again, they don't know what weird assortment of bombs and weapons you're going to end up with when you reach a section.
Right.
So sometimes you can kind of dismiss the difficulty. And in this, like, they're like, no, we know exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
We know exactly how hard we are making it. And we are doing it to you on purpose. It feels like it feels hateful sometimes. You're like, game, you know what you're doing. Stop.
But also
it's not like you.
It didn't help that the first time that I played the game, I got to watch some dude like masterfully dart his way through it, and I was like, oh, this is how a good player goes. And then I immediately play and die instantly, and I'm like, yeah, I'm so bad at this.
So I did find myself frustrated with the difficulty. There's also no checkpoint system in either of the home ports, which is really frustrating for a shmup that in the shmup world, it's a relatively long shmup. Now, it's maybe a little over an hour.
Well,
maybe.
That said, if you die, you immediately respawn. Unlike in a lot of older shmups where every time you die, you go back to a checkpoint. So you only really need a checkpoint if if you run out of continues, I believe? Because even continuing respawns you immediately, doesn't it?
True. Until you fully game over, you just keep right on trucking.
Right.
But it feels like in the home ports, I would have really liked some sort of checkpoint system or keep going from the level I made it to.
Right.
It's just anything to kind of mitigate
I think
what feels like a masterpiece of design that I can't navigate.
Really, I think the biggest frustration was the limited number of continues. If they had just given me the option in the menu to select unlimited continues from the beginning, it would have been a much more approachable game for people of varying skill abilities.
In the Saturn version, you can.
Right.
You can go to the options, you can turn on arcade mode, play arcade mode, which cuts out all of the story and animation, and then you can continually add credits.
Right.
But one, it doesn't carry over your stuff like story mode does, so you lose all your levels, so the game is much harder than it might be if you're playing story mode, and you lose the animated cutscenes, which, again, are not in English or translated or subtitled on the Saturn version, but it's still nice to see them, you know.
And you can, if I remember right, you can unlock unlimited credits in the story mode on the Saturn, but it's a lot of the same as on the 360, where you just have to play it forever before it eventually
It's gated for a certain number of hours, So it just... It's the same kind of problem I have with Ikaruga where like I want to experience more of the game.
Right.
And yeah, I don't mind playing it for 7, 8, 9, 10 hours, but it's 10 hours of the same 2 levels that I'm able to beat over and over and over, and because there's no checkpointing. And it's like, okay, do the same 2 levels. I can beat the first level of Radiant with my fucking eyes closed. I've played it so many times.
I'm with you there.
And it wears. It really does wear. And what's frustrating is like at the end of level 2, you get a choice of which level you go to.
Right.
It branches, but it doesn't branch early enough for people that aren't good enough at the game. Yeah. So people that aren't good at the game, it feels almost like a punishment. It's like, hey, play these same 2 levels over and over and over and over again, and then maybe we'll let you play the rest.
It does gradually give you more credits until you get to unlimited. So I think they thought that you would keep pushing a little bit further because you have more credits.
It does not translate that way. Grant, I'm just very bad at the game, I think. I mean, and also it's this thing where it feels like they really wanted to force you to play it over the course of many weeks and months. And that's fine for a Saturn game in the 90s, but for an Xbox 360 game, like, come on,
especially
guys.
Considering
like if I was paying
it was a budget Xbox 360 game too. It was an arcade game, so I didn't expect to have literally the same experience essentially.
Yeah, so I think it could just be a product of where it was like designing it as a full price game on the Saturn. Yeah, I can get why they're like, no, we really need to kind of make them stretch this out. It's $60 for a 1-hour game, which shmup fans are kind of used to, honestly. But I could see them. But then by the time the 360 port rolled around, it's fine. It's just it feels a little more problematic of a decision to me in this day and age. Let's talk ports.
Well, we did skip the graphics and sound earlier.
Let's talk graphics and sound that we skipped earlier. I think the game's visually decent for a Saturn game with polygons. I don't know that it would win any awards, but it looks good enough.
I thought it looked gorgeous when I first saw it. I thought that was one of the best looking games that I'd seen on the Saturn. And when I first saw it, was either right before or right after the PS2 came out. It was in that era. And I remember just thinking that it was gorgeous even then for that time with the newer games coming out. Yeah, but because it was a 2D game, like the polygons itself, I barely paid attention to. Those were just things I needed to blow up. But the backgrounds and everything all look great.
Oh, they do.
But the music, I think, is where it really stands out.
Yeah, so Satoshi Sakamoto, who did Ogre Battle and Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics and Final Fantasy 12, which are all just stellar soundtracks, which we've talked about some of those before.
Right.
It really is a great soundtrack. Some tracks are well worth a listen outside of the game, just as music.
Right, definitely.
But it really is very well done.
If you're a fan of Sakamoto from the other games, from the Tactics games, or from FF12, or from Ogre Battle, check it out. You would be surprised how similar it sounds to what you are used to.
Yeah, I do really like the graphical enhancements on the 360 version.
Yeah.
It really does. They really did redo the graphics with like little bits of like glow and bloom and stuff. It looks really good on the 360. And at first, I remember playing it on stream and being like, oh, let's see this piece of crap like filter they put on it. And then like twice on the stream, I was like, you know, it actually looks pretty good. they did a really good job. Because when you see a filter on a port of like a Saturn game with polygons, you're like, oh yeah, this is gonna suck. And it does not. It looks really good on 360. Really, really does. Let's talk ports. Obviously, it was an arcade game. It was ported to Sega Saturn, only in Japan, July 23rd, 1998. Published by ESP, who also did Lunar and Bangai-O and Grandia and Gun Griffin and a billion other things.
From what I was reading, ESP was originally put together by companies like Game Arts and Treasure and other smaller developers that wanted their own publishing arm but couldn't afford it. And so they all got together and became the mega publisher until they were eventually bought.
And like we talked about, the board they made it on was the STV was very similar to the Saturn, so it's very much faithful to the arcade version of the game, and really adds a whole separate story mode. And
the ability to save the system's SRAM.
Yeah, it's a very good port, and it's also ported to 360.
Yes, and it's still playable on Xbox One and Xbox Series X.
Yet another of the 360 exclusive shmups.
Yeah, so weird.
September 14th, 2011, published by Microsoft Studios, who you might know from Windows Solitaire, Minesweeper, and Azuric: Rise of Parathia.
They're hits.
In case you haven't heard of them.
Does anyone remember Azuric?
No, I don't know. I put in Windows Solitaire and Minesweeper as a joke, and then you added Azuric: Rise of Parathia.
It was a launch title for the Xbox.
Oh no,
it's not good.
It oddly enough, they did them in reverse order on 360. Ikaruga came out first, and then Radiant Silvergun came later. They added online play, which works well. We played it together. Now, granted, anyone that knows Radiant Silvergun will tell you if you're actually trying to play the game, do not play it multiplayer
unless you have unlimited credits.
It will just fuck your shit up. It has the updated graphics. It has the option to use Ikaruga's chain system instead of the Radiant chain system. And the 360 port really is great. Normally I would say grab it before it's gone because it seems ripe for delisting, but because it was published by Microsoft Studios, and it's been around since 10 years now. Jesus Christ, we're so old. And it seems like it might be.
And Treasure doesn't seem to be in any rush to delist it either. If anything, they seem more open to allow some of their older games to get published on other platforms now.
Oh, yeah. Guardian Heroes, I think, is still available on 360. Really, a lot of like Dreamcast stuff is still available on 360 as well. Virtua Fighter 2, Fighting Vipers, Virtual On. Like, it really is the Dreamcast.
Just a weird
2.
Sega platform.
Tell me about the reception that Radiant enjoyed.
Oh, it was incredibly well received. So much so that people were willing to pay ludicrous sums of money for it.
Oh, yeah. I remember when I was listening to podcasts, was the late aughts, and again, spoken about in reverent terms. People were quoting $250 price tags then. I don't know what it's at now.
More
after
than
the
that.
Is it? I'm going to look it up right now. Hold on.
Yeah, because I looked it up the other day because when I was making the notes for this, and I was like, I sold it for like $150. It's probably not going to go up from there.
Oh.
And then I immediately looked it up and like felt a little bit of pain.
A new copy is $319, a complete copy is $240, and a loose copy is about $150. So that's in the scheme of like video games.
I was looking through the sold listings on eBay for complete copies, and they were all over $400.
Weird.
Yeah. It was.
Now I'm saying. Oh, now here's the problem. Loose copies, volume 6 sales per year.
Oh.
And complete is only 2 sales per week. So not a lot of data. I am seeing a weird price spike around 2011.
When the Xbox version came out.
I'm seeing the spike in January 2011.
That's weird.
Weird. Very weird.
But yeah, it's still pricey. But it was very well received by critics and fans alike. It was reported as the 5th most popular arcade game in Japan and July 98 issue of Game Machine magazine, which it's a Japanese publication. The Saturn port was universally praised as well. And God, it like by the time I bought it, I felt like I was potentially overpaying for it. And that was early enough that it was still sub $100.
Yeah.
And now it's only gotten more ridiculous over the years. It's not quite Panzer Dragoon Saga ridiculous, which is another game that I once owned. And that one also hurts real bad when I think about
What's wrong with you, Saturn?
I don't know what's wrong with me. And of course, the Xbox 360 port was praised. But a lot of that, the praise initially was just due to the fact that the game was finally available for a reasonable cost. Right. People said like, oh yes, it's a good game and it is a good port and it looks nice and everything. But every review for it was like, but now you can finally have it for less than $100.
You can get it.
Yeah. Which is fine. That is also a good reason to get the 360 version. And again, like I said, it's also playable on Xbox One and on the new Xbox consoles. So it is still playable on a machine that you can buy today.
I played it on my Series X.
Yeah, me too.
Yep. as far as legacy, Ikaruga was originally Radiant Silvergun 2.
Right.
We did its own episode 200 episodes ago, 96. If you want to listen to that. It kickstarted Treasure's most prosperous era, which continued through the mid-2000s. They're not doing so well now.
No.
Looks like their last game was Geist Crusher God in 2014 on the 3DS eShop.
Yeah.
So that sucks.
I really hope that they can somehow recover, but I don't see how it happens.
I don't know.
I just hope that whoever ends up buying up the rights to their titles doesn't put them in the Disney vault forever.
Yeah. As far as final thoughts, I think Radiant Silvergun, again, is a very, very well-designed game with some really imaginative and cool and fun ideas that I will never beat because it is so fucking hard. Maybe if I put in 50 hours on my 360, it'll finally unlock the free play mode. But just a very, I wouldn't pay $250 for it, but I would pay $15 for it on the Xbox Marketplace right now because it's just very fun.
Between the Saturn and the Xbox, I've paid over $100 for it now. But it's still good. I certainly enjoyed it, and it was a spectacle, if nothing else, for a long time in my collection. Being able to pull out Radiant Silvergun and show it to people, and they'd be like, "What is this? And what is a Saturn?" And then I would have to explain to them what it was, and then they'd be like, "But why is this game important?" And then I would try to explain it to them, and they'd be like, "Why would anybody pay more than $50 for a video game?" And so it was always a very difficult conversation.
It's and the reason Radiant and Ikaruga are still so talked about, like, you cannot find lists of good shmups without one or both of these games on it. And it is because they are so different in a genre that is so samey. I really do love shmups, but they can really be broken out into like 3 or 4 categories, and that's all of them.
Right. And
then Ikaruga and Radiant not only are apart from those categories, but are each their own separate categories from even each other.
Right. And also they both you can tell that design of people who just enjoy shmups and are trying to do something different with it. So it is nice for that as well.
Yeah. Anyway, that's Radiant Silvergun.
Yeah.
We finally talked about it again. We covered it. This is our second Radiant Silvergun.
Yeah, we probably
episode.
should have mentioned that at the beginning, but this is a revisiting.
We originally split. We did a split topic of Radiant Silvergun and Steel Battalion.
They're the same game.
I guess we were just like, which games are expensive? I don't know, Steel Battalion and Radiant Silvergun.
Yeah.
We'll do those.
I think I brought over my copy of Steel Battalion at the time. But I think
you did, and I played it, and it was insane, and I loved it, and I wish I had it so bad.
I think that was after I had already sold my Radiant, though. I don't remember.
Yeah, it was indeed. It's okay. I got a copy. It's on a verbatim brand CDR.
Basically
it works
the same.
Great.
Perfect.
Works great. But yeah, it feels silly to even say, "Oh yeah, you should play Radiant Silvergun," because of course you should. But
unless you hate
I do
shmups,
think
then
I do
still
think
maybe
we
try
both.
it.
Even if you do hate them, like if you're like, "Oh, I don't like shmups, but I really like fast-paced puzzle games," I would recommend Ikaruga to that person.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, for sure, because it feels more like a fast-paced puzzle game than it does a shmup most of the time.
And especially with Ikaruga, you can just play dot eater mode and never fire a bullet.
Yeah, so it's again, this is why they are so universally recommended, because there's just nothing else like them.
Right.
Since them, realistically.
Yeah.
These days, most shmups seem to be a lot of just like, here's Dodonpachi, some more.
Or their retro re-releases of R-Type or Gradius.
True.
You know, I held out,
or retro re-releases of old Bullet Hell games or Cave shmups or whatever.
I held out hope for a long time that there was going to be another treasure shmup, and it just never happened. Instead, we got Wario World.
It's funny, I was just looking at Wario World on their list of games.
Yeah. I still have Wario World, but
they did a Dark Souls game, 2007 on the DS. They did Bleach Dark Souls.
I don't think that's a Dark Souls game.
It says Dark Souls right in the title, Saturn. What do you mean?
It's a Souls-like Bleach game.
You play a bottle of bleach, kind of Pepsi Man style, going through Dark Souls.
I don't think you know what Pepsi Man is either now.
It's a man that drinks lots of Pepsi. Yeah. So, like, if I drink a lot of Pepsi, I'm then a Pepsi man. Oh, I guess that'd be a Pepsied man. I've thus been Pepsied.
Never go full Pepsied.
You can go support us on Patreon if you want. Patreon.com/Retro Warriors. There's a link in the description. We would very much appreciate your consideration. You can also rate and review the show or just tell a friend about the show. Also helps out a lot. Just getting more ears on it. Right. Please come chat with us in Discord. Please. Pretty please. If you like virtual pets, definitely come chat with me in Discord. No one else wants to. Nope. I'm forcing people into this hobby one by one. I've got 2 or 3 people. Got 2 or 3 people in the Discord. And one day I'm going to buy one of those Dragon Quest slime virtual pets and mail it to Saturn. Then he's going to have to do it. He's going to have to. He's just going to let his little slime baby die. Yes. Anyway, do those things. And we would also like to thank the following patrons for making this show possible, starting with Burger Champ,
Captain Koloth,
Dave Nelson,
Elson Raves,
Gold Leader,
Mike Morse,
Pogs are back,
Ryan Walton,
Todd Bass,
and Zavin Torian
are all the people that make this wonderful show possible, and we thank them so very much. Indeed. Anyway, that's it for this week. Yeah. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week. And as always, let us cling together.